Or are you going to put your mask on?
Put my scarf on.
Oh, the air conditioning's blowing on you?
Yeah. It's a little cold here. And fashion.
It would be kind of funny if we all wore masks, but
yeah, it would be. Yeah.
Talent Transformation webcasts are brought to you by the Talent Transformation Guild to help you understand and prepare for the new world of work.
Hello, my name is Derek Shepherd. I'm going to be the host of today's Talent Transformation webcast, and I'm joined today with my friend and co-founder, Martin Belton.
Hi there.
Hi, Martin. Good to see you. Today, we're very lucky to be joined by Debbie Reynolds. Debbie, you're also known as the Data Diva. I'd love to understand where that came from. Data Diva is quite a title.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm happy to be on your podcast. I really enjoy these sessions, and I'm happy to have been asked. So the Data Diva moniker came from a conversation that I had with the Wall Street Journal reporter. And we were introducing ourselves at an event, and when I was telling her, trying to explain to her what I did for a living, she said, "Oh, you're like the Data Diva," and we just sort of laughed about it. And then I said, "Oh, that's really interesting." She said, "Oh, you should totally use that." And I thought, she's a reporter, she's smart, she knows how to sum things up. So I started using it a few years ago, and people really love it. I mean, I get emails and notes from people all over the world that say, "Oh my God, I love that."
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. So you're world-renowned in technology, you're into security, you're a thought leader, and you write papers and an advisor to not only multinational corporations, but also governments. I understand that you wrote a paper recently for the British Parliament, so thank you for doing that.
Related to facial recognition.
Well, that's a hot topic right now.
It is.
Can I ask for your opinions on facial recognition?
Well, funny you should ask that. I have lots of opinions about it. So I am a technologist. I love technology, but I feel as though facial recognition, because it is so, what's the word I'm looking for? It is being used in ways that it was really not intended for, and we're sort of pretending like it's more accurate than it is.
Right.
Especially for people of color, the error rate is like 10 times that of someone with lighter skin. And if you're using it for things like policing and things like that, that creates grave danger and harm, especially when they're trusting the computer, and the computer isn't God. The computer was developed by humans, and humans have fallacies and bias and things like that. And a lot of these systems aren't tested with people of color. So having more diverse people involved in the process for those things, and also limiting the uses to things that aren't so like life-threatening or harsh to that regard. I think it just needs to be repositioned, and then there needs to be a lot of ethics to it. There was a case in the U.S. recently where a guy, he was arrested because they thought that he looked like someone on a facial recognition said that he, they did a search in driver's license databases, and they said that his face matched this person, and even the people who picked him up said that he didn't look like the person. The people who arrested him said he didn't look like him. The judge said, like, this is not this person or whatever, but everyone was saying, well, we're just following what the computer told us. And it's like, that's not, humans should rule computers should not rule humans.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's actually one of the European ethics, I think, is that people make judgments about people. Computers do not make judgments about people. And I think we're so used to just trusting stuff on the computer. And we can see how so easily fooled we are with facial recognition. To be fair, I'm one of the worst people to recognize anybody. And Martin knows this. Every morning I go, "Who are you again?" I'm not sure if that's my age or my facial recognition skills. That's interesting. And But it's great to see the high-tech companies, Microsoft, IBM, they're all kind of withdrawing their support of providing these technologies to the police, because I think they're making invalid assumptions based on that technology. So that's one step. And to have ethics around this is how do we develop those ethics? That's another challenge.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, a lot of, especially in the U.S., a lot of law enforcement is about, laws aren't necessarily ethical.
Right. Yeah.
So we have to really make sure that ethics is in the mix when we're thinking about these things. Also, companies like Microsoft or Amazon, who are they're saying they're halting the sale of facial recognition to the police, which is not a bad step, but I think the technology really needs to be improved. Like, it's not going to go away. People still want it. There are a lot of companies that are still buying it and selling it. Police agencies are still using these other technologies. And my thing is, if you want to use it, improve it, or, really understand how it really works, and don't trust it as if it's, a God type, application.
Right. Yeah. So the American Constitution set a bunch of rules and had this separation between the branches of government, and it seems like we need something similar for AI, because in AI we saw Amazon was using it for recruitment, and then we saw a lot of discrimination come up through their use of AI, and they stopped it as soon as they realized it. They stopped it. We've also seen AI used in the court systems to save judges the burden of trying to sift through multiple evidence. But then we see biases, AI biases come into that, because it basically amplifies any personal biases that are in the chain. So it across all of our use of AI and machine learning, getting something like governance rules. So how are we going to use this stuff to be fair and equitable? You're called in when people need help with data security and data privacy, and when they have breaches and complex projects. So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. So we're going to kind of tease out the issues to do with the security and privacy issues of people of working from home. And so we recently did a survey, a back to work survey, and we found that 31% of large organizations said they had real challenges concerning security and data protection. And that is why we kind of sought someone out. And as soon as we heard there was a data diva out there, we said, that's the person we need to talk to. And so data security is so much harder to deal with when people are using their own networks, potentially their own devices, their home offices, and they might have they might have people in their house that should not see data, so they might pop into the home office and potentially see data. So what are the risks that concern your clients?
That's a mouthful. Let's see.
I apologize.
There are many risks, that everyone has and that my clients have. Obviously, a lot of working from home before the coronavirus was almost like a meritorious system. So, the people who were higher ranked in the company or had special, accommodations, they were being able to work from home, and other people weren't. So it was not only just logistically a challenge, it may have been more of a cost challenge, because not every person in the office may have had a laptop or a computer, or you're having people, companies who were doing things like bring your own device, where people are using their own phones for business stuff, and they start using their own computers. So the issues are very vast. So first of all, it's like, how do companies figure out how to secure their data when people are not in the office? So, companies are starting, or if they had not already started, they were starting using things like VPN networks, so that people have secure connections into the office. They're asking people not to use listening devices in places where they're working at home. So, like, let's say if you have an Alexa speaker or something.
Oh, wow.
They don't want you to do that because those things are literally recording everything that you say and doing things with it. Like if you have papers that you're printing, they're saying like don't have your kid like writing their homework on it or something. Make sure that you're these are things that you probably weren't ever thinking about inside the office. But now that you're at home, you really have to consider those things. Also, there is a rise of phishing attacks in terms of hacking because hackers take advantage of people when they are frazzled and afraid and concerned. And now people are in these different patterns that they're not accustomed to. So they may be more likely now than ever to click on some strange link that comes in their email. And hackers are really having a field day with people because people are afraid, people are concerned, that everyone's trying to adjust. They're discombobulated, and while we're trying to do this adjustment, hackers are really taking advantage of the situation.
Mm-hmm. And what, so just picking up the phishing attacks, what are the kind of mitigations you see being used to mitigate phishing attacks?
Well, phishing attacks they're typically an inbound message of some sort that they're asking you to take some action. So and they want you to do it quickly. So it may be something like, oh, you have to do this like right away, or so-and-so from the CEO called and said they want you to do X, Y, and Z. So a lot of those things are just understanding the patterns that hackers do, which is trying to they're going to send you something inbound that they want you to respond to right away. You probably have to click a link somewhere to do it, and then chances are they want you to communicate with them the same way that they're communicating with you. So let's say they send you an inbound email. You may say, well, look, can I call you? And they don't want you to call. Like they'll stop, right? Because they don't want to, you're changing the pattern on them as you go. So the really important thing is, if you're not sure about a link, like don't click on it. If you're suspicious in any way, something weird, someone's asking you to do something, you pick up the phone, call that person within the company to try to verify it so that you're not doing something strange. But, even before the pandemic, phishing was a big problem, and a lot of it had to do with kind of the structure of a corporation. So let's say that you got a note from the CEO and you're in accounting that says, you need to wire this money, right away. Those things happen in corporations. So that may not be that bad, that much out of the ordinary, but there has to be checks and balances in those types of situations, and people need to be alerted that hackers are very savvy and they're extremely good at what they do. A lot of times they may have infiltrated a network, and we always think about a hacker as, okay, they go in and they get stuff right away. It's like, no, sometimes they'll infiltrate a network and they'll just watch. They'll watch the email traffic and stuff, and they'll know patterns of what things people are doing or how people are speaking. So you have to be really careful.
Wow, so.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? Because just to go back to what you said about LinkedIn and I think probably Google Nest and items like that. I mean, that is, I find that quite scary that my device over there is listening to me all the time. But is that actually happening? Are these devices picking things up, and have people been hacked because of the devices, or is it misuse? Is it the organisations such as Google or whatever misusing it, or is it us that's misusing it and just not aware what we should or shouldn't be doing?
Well, I guess there are a couple of things. So one thing is, all these devices have IP addresses. So because they're Internet of Things, they almost like your computer. They have a address and they have a name on a network. And a lot of times when people set these things up, they use the default passwords, or they don't do two-factor authentication. So if you're using the default password and everyone else has the same password, it's like super easy for someone to hack the information. But also those listening devices, the companies that have those devices, they want to know what you're asking. So they're using that information for training. So it's not as private as you think it may be. And a lot of times people have had situations where they were just talking casually about things, and then they got an email about some product or something, and they think it was a coincidence, and it probably is not. So,
Cool.
So we know there's lots of risks out there, and we can't just resolve every risk. I mean, you've highlighted the biggest risk, and dual factor authentication, and picking up the phone, and being aware of this for those phishing attacks. How do we kind of attempt to stop every threat? Because we could pay attention to the very big and obvious threat, but there's all these other threats that are happening. How do we manage that?
I think it takes, vigilance and education. So I know a lot of companies, they do education maybe once a year on security stuff. I think it should be way more than that. It should be, at least quarterly, if not more. There needs to be more communication because these attacks are very sophisticated now. I don't know if you've ever heard of beacons. So a beacon is a method that someone has to send you a message in some way where they want to get some information back from you. So let's say it's like 70% of retail stores use these things. So like you're walking through a store, you have your cell phone, they could tell whether you're inside or outside the store. They could tell you're in the frozen fruit aisle for 2 minutes and things like that. Hackers also love beacons. So let's say you walk past the bank and this is not even your bank. There may be a fat hacker may have installed a beacon near a bank and will send you a text message to say, your account has been hacked. We need you to click on this link or something like that. And I've actually seen these things happen. It's like, so because if it were my bank, I would be concerned, but it wasn't. But it's really interesting that they're able to use those things to try to infiltrate people's phones and their computers to try to get them to make some type of action.
Right. So it's attacking the person when they feel that it might be real. So if they're walking past their bank, for instance, and they go, "Oh, bank, yeah." So how do you prioritize these risks?
Say in terms of prioritization, hackers are more concerned about getting the best information that they can. So I think you're probably more at risk if you're doing things in a corporate environment than you are in a personal environment, because they feel like if hackers can get into a business environment, they can attack more people, right? Because you're like on a network. Where if you're an individual, it's like let's say they want to steal your identity, they rather like have a bunch of people that they can attack at once rather than sort of the onesie twosie thing. So anything that you're doing with corporate information, you want to be able to do it as securely as possible. But there are also really smart, easy cyber hygiene things that people can do. So one thing I recommend is like don't have your computer on. A lot of people don't turn their computers off, or you stay connected to the network and someone can actually come in and, like let's say you're on Wi-Fi, someone could possibly hack your Wi-Fi and like be on your computer doing things as if they were you. So it's really important that when you're away from your computer that you, either lock it or shut it down, or I hibernate from time to time. Another easy thing that people tend not to do at home that will help them in their corporate and their personal lives is to make sure you do the updates, the Windows updates or whatever updates. So like you should be restarting your computer at least once a week, if not more. Make sure it's shut down when you're not using it or locked when you're not using it. A lot of hackers, even the big companies that you hear, they have all these data breaches. When you look into what happened, the types of hacks that they're doing, this is not like Tom Cruise Mission Impossible, someone hanging from a ceiling. This is like, a server hasn't been patched, for 2 months or something like that. So just doing the basic things, will definitely help because hackers are looking for the lowest hanging fruit. So they're going to go to the easiest target that they can get to. And my goal is to make people not be the easy target.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you talk for a moment, Debbie, about the disposal of devices? Because I know my phone and my work computer has a lot of sensitive data on it, and a lot of, I sign non-disclosure agreements with people. And so I'm kind of hypersensitive about that, and I'm sure all corporations are. Well, can you talk to us about data and device disposal?
That's a good question. Yeah, a lot of people think, oh, I got a new phone, I changed over my information, and now I'm gonna, sell it or give it away or do something. And I typically don't give my, I have like every phone I've had for the last 20 years because I just don't want to give it away. But if you have to dispose of phones, you really should look up the best ways to do that. So you definitely want to wipe the device. So it's not good enough just to go in and try to delete certain things. You want to literally like reset it completely and wipe it and make sure it's clean as if no one ever used it before. If you have a SIM card that was in there, I recommend you take that out because people can get their own SIM cards, things like that. Also for computers, this is a big deal. So let's say you have a computer, it's really old, you get a new computer, you may copy files off of that computer, but you definitely don't want to keep your profile on there or anything. You want to be able to reset it, almost do a factory reset, delete the stuff off of it, do a factory reset. Definitely. One thing I also recommend people not do ever is reuse thumb drives or hard drives. So let's say you have a thumb drive and you have a lot of information on it, and then you delete the stuff off of it and put other stuff on it. I don't recommend that you do that because if those things get lost, people may get that information, or sometimes when you're erasing it, if you're doing it through Windows, it may not erase the information completely. So typically I have people do for hard drives, if they're going to dispose of it, you want to do like a Department of Defense level wipe of the device where it goes over the sectors of the device like multiple times to make sure it's completely overwritten and it can't be restored.
It's incredible the science that must go into hacking drives. I mean, if you overwrite it, you think that's done. To overwrite it multiple times, yeah, it's incredible. I do know Staples offer a service where you can take your device there. Because when I was looking to do this at one point, I couldn't establish trust with the other services that was out there. But I figured Staples, big brand, they have a reputation to guard, and so I did work with them.
And they also Staples does shredding too. That's a really big thing. So a lot of your business documents, they shouldn't go into like regular garbage because hackers do that too. So we see that in movies all the time, right? So, but Staples and those companies like that, they have spaces where you can securely dispose of things. They have garbage cans with locks on them, and they literally go and shred those documents.
Mm-hmm. Do you see your clients are concerned about paper that people might keep at home, and that that people might, employees at home might just print things off and then leave them on their desk, or get to that? Or is that a concern? And what kind of guidance, training, policies do people have in place for that?
It is a concern, especially, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times I'm jotting notes down on random sheets of paper that I just grab. And, especially if you have corporate information or you're working with confidential information, you want to make sure, almost like you're in the office, that you're securing that information. So you don't want it like on desks, if you're done working with it, you want a locked place. I would recommend people not print things. So only print stuff unless you absolutely have to print it. That's one way to do it. But if you have to print stuff and you have to have it around, you want to have a secure place where you can store it. Again, you don't want it to be like end up in your kid's homework assignment because they used a sheet of paper that they pulled off the printer. So yeah, just have to think about those things. So for me personally, I try not to print. So I'm very anti-print at some point.
Yeah, me too. So you're an expert, and you have the brain the size of a planet. And you do this all the time. So you can kind of pinpoint them and help people mitigate the risk. But are there frameworks or guidance or best practice that help people kind of think this through? I mean, clearly they should be giving you a call and other experts a call, but are there frameworks that help guide people on this?
There are a lot of frameworks out there. So there are ones that people think of like NIST or ISO. Those are definitely good. there are a lot of companies that do their own frameworks, and I don't think there's no magic button, there's no easy button in terms of doing this.
Talking of Staples.
Yeah, exactly. Go to Staples, but at least those things will have you think about it. But I think the place, the difference is the framework can give you a idea of the scope of the issue and what you need to do, but you really need to take the steps to actually implement implement a plan and come up with something that works for you, because these frameworks, in my opinion, are not super prescriptive. So they're saying, this is what you should think about, this is what maybe the question you should ask, but it's not gonna do it for you. So I've seen people, they say, oh my God, we have a breach and we use NIST or we ISO XYZ. Like, that's like, in my opinion, that's like you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? Yeah. So it's about doing as opposed to just saying what you're going to do. You have to literally put those things into practice, and you have to make sure it fits your organization. So, yeah, that's just as bad. Let's say, someone says, oh, I have all these frameworks that I'm using and we still got hacked. And, that can definitely happen, but you have to make sure that whatever you're putting in place literally works for you and your company.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a bit like buying an umbrella, but leaving it at home and wondering why you're getting wet.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So when do you normally get called in by clients? Is it after they've been hacked, or is it, we got all these frameworks, but we still feel insecure?
Yeah.
When do they need you?
Well, there are a couple of different things that happen. So I get a lot of calls from companies that are trying to move into new markets. So, or they're trying to get investment, or investors are trying to buy things. So literally, they're saying, like, whatever we were doing before seemed like it worked, but now we're doing this new thing and we don't know whether we have the coverage that we need, or, it's whatever practices that we're doing, do we need to secure those? Are we mature enough? Especially when I work with people in privacy, where some companies, they're super mature on cyber security, but they're not very mature on privacy, and they're not the same thing. So those are things that I get called in for. Also, obviously the people who are in trouble. So I say, I personally do like to talk with clients who, like I like to say, have been stung by the bee. So once you've been stung by the bee, you have a very serious understanding. It's no longer theory about what's happening to you. So those conversations get a lot easier when people are in those emergency situations.
Can I just ask a quick question, just to sort of lead on from that? And on data confidentiality, does working from home change any of the rules? Well, I mean, in either in the UK or the US, I don't know whether you know anything about the UK rules, but does actually, using the data away from an office when perhaps that organization has only had authorization to use it in a certain way, would that make them liable to prosecution? And should organizations check for those sort of things?
That's a good question. I don't think that the laws, the way that they're written, are not written in a way to say just because you're outside of an office that you have to do something X, Y, and Z. So although your confidentiality obligations follow you wherever you go. So whether you're in the office or on the beach, if you're working on client confidential information, you still have an obligation to protect it, the best way that you can. So it sort of would be kind of a blanket confidentiality, and so it puts more onus on the person who's working outside of the office and doesn't have like we were talking about, like, you don't have a shredder down the hall or in your house, or you may not have a locked box, or you may not have like a lot of desks at home don't have locks on it, right? So you may have a lock in your office at work. So you really have to think those things through, and it just puts more onus on the individual to make sure that they find ways to replicate the type of security that they would typically have in the office as much as possible.
Okay.
With the migration of people to home, and working from home, it's kind of extended the surface area of attack. It's extended the vulnerabilities. And we know that hackers get smarter, defenses get smarter, so it's like an arms race trying to keep up with this. Is there any hope for the future? It feels a little concerning when we see all these reports in the news, and now we see the surface area of attack increasing. What's your point of view of the future and how we can protect data and privacy?
No, there's no hope, Eric.
Oh, okay. That's so reassuring. Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, I think that there is hope. The thing that I'm happy to see, even in these, these times where we're in trials and tribulations, is that companies are starting to get really serious about cybersecurity, which I'm happy about. Where a lot of them were like, the computers are working fine and we're okay. So now that we have this new system where we have some people working completely at home, some are working at home and in the office, people are traveling. It's not even work from home, it's like work from anywhere now. So as long as you have a computer, you can work wherever you want. So I think because of that shift, and people had to get really serious about finding ways for people to securely connect to the office, finding ways to communicate with them about how they handle their own computing and they're using their own computers, that I see that they're getting serious about spending and investing in cybersecurity and making sure that they're being as protected as possible, knowing that they can't control the risk. So the risks were always there, but now that, as you said, people are working from home or working from anywhere, the attack surface is more broad now. So I think and I'm happy about that, because for me, I almost pull my hair out, because you're thinking, you want companies to be as proactive as possible. Some just are not that way. So
Right.
more reactive. But I'm hoping that this will help people, not only companies be more educated about cybersecurity and privacy issues, but they do the proper investment so that they're not the low-hanging fruit on the tree, the hacker tree.
Right. Yeah. And so one advantage of the news reports of reporting all these hacks is that it would stimulate people to think more deeply about their own cybersecurity before they get stung by the bee. And of course, when they've been stung, then they take it seriously anyway.
Exactly.
Martin, any more questions from your side? I recognize I've been dominating the conversation here, but I find the subject fascinating.
I mean, I do find it fascinating. It's a great subject and an important subject, certainly for us, for the future of work. Do you see the systems getting more complicated? And if they do get more complicated on these things, how the hell are we going to manage it all? Because, when I first started looking into cybersecurity, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, it seemed to me that it was, it increasingly difficult to sort of hold it all together. How do we, and I guess you've already kind of asked this, but how do we keep one step ahead? And what would be the next big thing that we should be worrying about?
Good question. The next big thing, let's see. Well, let me answer your question about the complication. I think it has to become more simple, because it's something that everyone has to use or everyone has to have. I'm really interested to see a lot of companies are coming out with tools and products that are like either low code or no code systems, where people, you can be your own like self-serve, cyber expert, not necessarily expert where you can like run a network, but at least in your own private life, being able to find things or have companies help you with software that will help you get to a better standing. Just using basic things like virus scanning. That stuff used to be like super complicated, and now it's much easier now in terms of being able to implement things like that. And then in terms of what's the next big thing, I think it's like killer robots or something. I think we had the bees, and then there's the Saharan dust storm or something that's coming over the U.S. I think AI, robotics, definitely the Internet of Things, really interesting. When I ask people like how many devices they have in their house, and they say, "Oh, I have 3 or 4. I have a phone. I have a laptop or something. And then I'm like, do you have a smart thermostat? Do you have a smart speaker? And once you start adding all this stuff up, is your refrigerator calling to get milk for you from Amazon? So you have a lot of connected devices almost everywhere that you go. And all those devices are recording so much information about you, like even your car. I went to, a couple of years ago, I had gone to like a new dealership that I had never been to get an oil change. And I asked them, I said, so should I give you my name and stuff? And they're like, no. They stuck some device in the car and they pulled up my name. They have my phone number. I'm like, why does my car have my phone number? Like, this is ridiculous. It's totally insanity. So, there's just so much data collection is happening. I think we just have to be vigilant and understand what these things are doing. I'll tell you a funny story. I'm more of a paranoid, almost like the tin hat wearing person. And my brother, he's like more rah-rah about technology. But him and I were talking, we were just having a conversation, something about the military, because he's a retired Marine. And he had said something, he couldn't remember at that point the name of whoever was the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the U.S. And his phone just started talking. He said, oh, well, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is blah, blah, blah. And he sort of laughed. And I'm like, this is totally creepy. It's like, because we were not talking to the phone, but the phone was listening to what we were saying. And I'm like, that is not good.
That would make me nervous.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Debbie, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this webcast. But thank you so much. Fascinating stuff and important things that people have to pay attention to. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's been fascinating. Thank you, gents.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Martin.
Great. Thanks. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this webcast, please subscribe and like the show. And to learn and understand more about the new world of work, please visit www.talenttransformation.com. Subscribe and become a member. Thank you.